Have you ever sat through a meeting and watched everyone contribute and share and still recognize that nothing real was decided? Well, not only that, you leave the room and then you realize we didn't even mention the one thing that was supposed to be the topic of discussion. Well, that's not merely just a waste of time, it's the quiet danger of groupthink. And I'm going to tell you how you can avoid it next. Welcome to Crossroads and Catalyst, the podcast with Shanita B. I am your host. This is where we discuss the thoughtful, wise, and strategic perspective at a crossroads can be the catalyst for change. Well, if this particular topic resonates with you, then take a minute and leave a review. And also remember to share it with a colleague who's experiencing the same thing. Okay, now we are jumping into the problem because this particular topic is one that is all too familiar. And we all recognize that we're working with a lot of good people, a lot of smart people, but we don't seem to be making the level of progress or the type of progress that we had hoped, especially when we had these grand ideas and these major strategies that somehow came together, but we just can't seem to get the movement that we thought that we were going to achieve. And what we're finding is that people are contributing in these meetings, but we're still up against this challenge. And really, it is the elephant in the room that no one is talking about. Decisions ultimately get delayed as a result because no one is speaking up. And then these important issues that we know that we have to address, we just kind of tiptoe around them and we don't make any progress, no movement, no anything. And I can relate to this certainly because the higher you climb through an organization, the more meetings you become involved in. And this is not something that is just at the middle manager level. The people who are basically doing the everyday work, they're not concerned because they're actually doing work. They're sitting in front of their computers, they're having conversations and passing information back and forth to one another. But when you start to get into middle management and then you move upwards even into executive management, then you recognize that this is kind of a big deal because we spend a lot of our time in meetings and it costs a lot of money to have these highly paid folks sitting around not making any real progress. I had this happen and I've had it happen more than once. And it's a battle I think that most of us have to deal with on a regular basis. We had this meeting set. This meeting is planned for an hour and a half. We finished the core of the meeting in the first hour. And at that point, when it was recognized that, oh, we finished early, we wrapped up early, excuse me. Well, then the leader says, well, I don't have anything else on the agenda. So, I guess we're done. And when I tell you people had a foot out the door and laptops halfway shut, they were ready to go. And before they could do that, I said, well, wait a minute. Don't we have a meeting next week where we have to present information to our teams? Yes. Okay. Well, I think that we all have an extra 30 minutes on our calendars now so that we can discuss that. And it was just as simple as that. And hey, nobody had the opportunity to really move and get out of that because they recognized the importance of it too. And part of what I did or why I did that was because number one, that meeting was coming up within the next couple of weeks. And number two, I didn't want I didn't want everything to be crammed in to the last few days, trying to make everything urgent so that we can pull something together for this meeting. Just was not helpful. And number three, which I think is the most important, we're in the process of trying to fine tune a strategy, which still needs a true and serious form. And we did not have time to waste by dispersing because we had an extra few 30 minutes that we could delegate to something else. That was just not an option. And so I want to clarify what groupthink is because that definitely is important. And it's not simply blind agreement because I don't think that most people, when they find themselves in this groupthink type scenario, that they're blindly following and agreeing with everyone in the room. But part of what it looks like is a lack of challenge. People are not disinterested, they're hindered from offering the challenge that may be necessary to spark additional curiosity or inquisitiveness or even contribution. And then another thing is fear of dissent. So, this definitely speaks to the culture of an organization when people have a level of fear or intimidation about speaking in opposition or against the grain of what seems to be the consensus. Another thing is excessive politeness. You might find this that when you're contributing in some of these type of meetings, people are overly praising an idea or pouring accolades, and it just gets kind of weird sometimes. And then another thing is decisions are made to preserve harmony over truth. Now, this one is one of those things that gets under my skin because I don't think that it is necessary to try to preserve harmony when truth is telling us that this is the decision that we need to make or this would be the better alternative. It is not enough to sacrifice the growth of an organization because we want to preserve harmony with a certain person. Now, there are all kinds of things that would roll into that, but again, I'm not going to get on a soapbox. Okay, so then how does this show up in leadership teams? Well, I have several things, several reasons or ways rather how this can show up. Deferred decisions. Too. When I hear deferred decisions, what it reminds me of is what we see in almost every political season or in midterm elections or when you have some high priority things going on politically, you hear the phrase kick the can down the road. Well, this is what happens when decisions are deferred. We're kicking the can down the road. And while it frustrates us to see this and hear about it in the national or even the local news, a lot of us are entrenched in these miniature Washington, D.C. type moments on a regular basis because no one is willing to make a decision or contribute in a way that will help to meaningfully consider what our options are and what the best approach would be. Okay, so then number two, vague consensus. Now this is one of those scenarios where maybe some solution was offered, but it's not necessarily popular. It may not even be very good, and everybody is confused on whether or not we agree because there's been so much chatter. It was just kind of thrown out there, and it's kind of like alligators when flesh gets into the water. Everybody's just kind of in on it, and you don't really know what's going on. You're trying to figure it out. Well, we don't really know why we're agreeing upon this, but it's like, okay, yeah, we're going with it anyway. And then another item, agenda items that never get traction. Now, these are the things that are probably really important and need to stay at the forefront, but because no one really wants to pick it up and carry it, they just get kind of thrown by the wayside. And then finally, the meeting before the meeting. So you have people who are actually meeting together before the meeting because maybe they have one thought or mindset about the topic of discussion, but they never mention that in the group setting, in the official meeting. And then you also have the parking lot culture. This is where we're going to park that for now, or we're going to stick a pin in it. And that's basically just a camouflage to make it sound as if we're going to handle business or we're going to pick it up later. But then they're hoping that it never gets brought up again. It just kind of goes to the graveyard to die. So we want to explore some of the choices that we have in this scenario, in these groupthink scenarios. Number one, and I say number one, I have five things that I think will be helpful in this situation. And you want to try to apply these as you're thinking through when you approach your next meeting. So, number one, name it when you see it, because sometimes the reason why we don't speak up in these settings is because it's awkward and it's uncomfortable. So, if even one person is willing to say, well, are we just avoiding this altogether because it's uncomfortable? You'd be surprised, and it would probably be quite refreshing to the people in the room to have someone acknowledge it because then you start to look around and see the looks on people's faces and see how relieved they are, and then they'll start to contribute in a way that they hadn't before because now that veil has been pierced, right? Number two, sign a devil's advocate, especially if there is someone who is his has a personality that's already the devil's advocate type, and they're willing to play that role, not just to be rebellious, not for the sake of being rebellious, but for the sake of trying to get people to contribute and talk and think through and not just kind of follow the herd. We want to help people to avoid the herd mentality. Okay, and then number three, this is one that really gets under my skin because I've seen this in so many places. Replace the roundtables with a true agenda. We have to get past the point of just doing check-ins. It's not enough to do check-ins. And this is really bad because again, when you have high-level officials within an organization sitting around a table talking about their calendars, you know you're wasting a lot of time and spending a lot of money because it costs if we're paying people high salaries to sit around a table and talk about who they're meeting with. And that's not to say that the meetings are not important, but are they really that important to where they should rise to the level where we're spending dedicated time in the day, hours to talk about it in a group setting? So put together an agenda and stick to the agenda. Number four, invite disagreement without punishment. Again, this speaks to the culture because you want to reward people for speaking up to ask questions or to offer a different perspective or a different alternative. And you want to avoid being defensive. So if there are people in the room who are prone to being defensive because maybe they feel like they're being attacked, their ideas are being attacked, they're taking things personally, well, you want to reward the people who are offering the contribution that would present a bit of a challenge and make people think. And maybe if there's someone in the room who is being defensive, well, that might be a sideline conversation that might need to take place. And that's something for another conversation. Okay, so then number five, recenter on the mission. You want to bring things back to the starting point to say, okay, what is it that we're trying to accomplish, and what is our mission? Does this align with what our mission says that we are supposed to be doing, and is this moving us toward our goal? This is extremely important. So now that we've discussed those five things, and you recognize that there are some ways that you can break the group think, you want to make sure that you understand that there's an opportunity to reframe this. And of course, you can do that with those options that I just mentioned. But you also just want to make sure that you understand that consensus is not the enemy, because sometimes it is actually helpful to have everyone in agreement or at least recognize that there are some good things that we can walk away with if we're all of on the same accord and we're trying to move in the same direction. But you want to recognize also that complacency is the enemy because it undermines the good that you're trying to do. If your team is complacent and they're completely satisfied with the groupthink scenario, well then you're definitely not going to get any true movement because they're not curious enough, they're not motivated enough to do anything any differently because they're comfortable. And so really what you need is someone who is willing to be bold. Okay, because leadership is really not about being agreeable. You're trying to move people in a different direction and achieve some goals and objectives, which is going to require boldness. And if the person in the room who is designed or who has the role of doing that is not willing to, well, now is an opportunity for you to do that very thing. And you don't have to have a title in order to accomplish that. So, what are some other things that you can do? Well, you can implement this almost immediately. If you have meetings that are coming up and ones that are high priority type meetings or maybe urgent in nature, and you've already experienced that there are those in the organization who have kind of fallen prey to the groupthink phenomena, well, before that next meeting, you want to clarify one or two critical decisions that must be made. And you want to make sure to keep that as the priority for the meeting. And then practice. Practice by saying something like this. I don't think that we have solved these things yet. I think we need to refocus and on these things and just talk about it a little bit longer until we come to a decision about what we're going to do next, and put it in whatever language or lingo is comfortable for you, but make sure that you contribute that in that setting to kind of help people get back to what the true topic is. And then if you're not the highest title in the room, well, again, now is the time to do so because you don't have to have a title in order to be a leader. And these are some things that I think will be extremely helpful to you as you're trying to move past this group think and help people to understand number one, that their voices are important, and that the decisions that need to be made are going to be major players in the direction in which the organization moves. Major companies and even small companies that ultimately become major, they don't get that way because they've um, aligned themselves with groupthink. They have to have people who are readily working toward moving things in a different direction in an upward trajectory. I cannot even talk. They are willing to move people in an upward trajectory. And in order to do that, you're going to have to think a little differently. You're going to have to be someone who is willing to be a change agent or to help us help to move the decisions of the one who is called to be the change agent. You're going to have to get on board with some of those things. And it doesn't mean that you have to think in the same way as they do. It just means that you're going to have to contribute in a way that helps everyone to think, hey, is this really what we should do? If so, why? If not, why? And what else can we do to make some things happen? Okay. So I trust that this resonated with you and recognize that you are not alone. And I'm sure that you and your colleagues have talked about this kind of thing quite often. And it's not easy to overcome, but it can be done. Okay. So we are at the end of our episode, and I trust that this has been helpful to you. So be thoughtful, be wise, and be strategic. And remember, crossroads reveal who you are, catalysts shape who you become. Every decision matters. So make it count. I'll talk to you next week.